When women overcome harsh beginnings, it often isn't just raw willpower. It's a mix of inner drive and some form of support, even if that support is inconsistent or arrives later in life. And when those stories reach far back in history, they stand out even more because the structural barriers were even tighter. Although one could argue that societal barriers are in place for many marginalized communities and still developing countries today. Imagine being a woman having been dealt a really lousy hand and able to overcome the difficulty. That's often the exception, but when it's an exception, we see those women, even as young girls, who not only have an internal guide, but someone in their life, a guardian, a teacher, parent, friend, mentor, or an organization that provides that positive foundation and that push to do and be more. We have so many past and current examples of women who have had challenging situations, from Madam C.J. Walker, the founder of hair products for women of color, Oprah Winfrey, Dolly Parton, Fannie Lou Hamer, the civil rights advocate, J.K. Rowling. The list is long and varied. But did you know that there are a number of female leaders that date back thousands of years? Theodora was born around 500 CE, likely in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. The story of Empress Theodora is one of the clearest early examples of that pattern. Her father worked as a bear trainer at a circus. After his death, her family struggled financially. She became an actress and performer, which at the time had a low social status and was often associated with scandal. She met Justinian I before he became emperor, and Roman law forbade nobles from marrying actresses, so Justinian changed the law to marry her. When he became emperor in 527 CE, Theodora became empress and a co-ruler in practice. She wasn't just a figurehead, she actively influenced policy and governance. What makes Theodora especially relevant is that she didn't just escape her circumstances, she reshaped the system that judged her. She supported laws that improved women's rights in areas like marriage and property. She took action against forced prostitution and created safer conditions for vulnerable women. She used proximity to power to shift norms, not just survive them. So unlike some modern narratives that emphasize individual triumph alone, Theodora's story also shows what happens when someone gains power and then redirects it structurally. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, the podcast highlighting nonprofits and social enterprises with budgets under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Scherck Wittcoff, and I'm excited to be your host. We bring you the lesser-told stories of organizations that are bold, passionate, and making a real impact. Perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Small and Gutsy is more than a podcast. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We've recently been ranked number 8 on FeedSpot's top 30 social impact podcasts and number 3 and number 9 by Million Podcasts for the top 30 volunteer podcasts and for our youth empowerment episodes, respectively. We're proud of these honors, but honestly prouder still of our mission to elevate the visibility of small but mighty change makers. Do you happen to know a nonprofit or social enterprise doing incredible work? If so, please send them our way to laura@smallandgutsy.org. Theodora Africa, yes, probably named for Theodora, Empress Theodora, is built around a market-first approach to social impact. Instead of starting with aid, it starts with paid work tied to real demand, like virtual assistant services, then builds training and personal development around that. That's a meaningful shift from traditional charity models. Connecting the name back to Empress Theodora is also intentional. There's a symbolic through line, women moving from constrained, vulnerable circumstances into positions of agency and influence. And I want to share, and my guest, of course, will share much more about the program, a few elements that are highlighted around the importance in development work. Jobs first, not just training. Many programs train people but don't connect them to income. Tying skills directly to paying clients, for example, U.S. small businesses, addresses that gap. Participation in the global market, outsourcing services like admin support or lead generation can create income streams that are often higher than local alternatives. Pathway to ownership. If implemented as described, moving participants toward owning parts of the business is a big deal. It shifts from employment to wealth building. Focus on women exiting exploitation. That's a huge one. Economic alternatives are one of the most effective long-term tools for reducing vulnerability to trafficking and the sex trade. And that's true, by the way, in the U.S. around domestic violence. What makes this interesting is that it blends entrepreneurship, workforce development, and anti-trafficking efforts into one system instead of treating them separately. Transformation isn't just about internal strength or inspiration. It's about structures that create real options: income, dignity, and agency. Michael Podolny is the CEO and co-founder of Theodora Africa, a nonprofit that helps disadvantaged African women escape poverty and exploitation by giving them skills, jobs, and a path to independence, rather than just short-term aid. And their first venture, and my guest will clarify if this is already they're into more, is Theodora Ghana Virtual Assistant serving U.S.-based clients. By reversing how social impact is delivered with job creation coming first, Theodora Africa motivates change with the reward of well-paying, meaningful work that leads to lasting careers. I am so honored to introduce my guest today, Michael Podolny. So, Michael, let's get started. I would love to hear the inspiration behind Theodora, and I hope I got the connection to the Empress correct.
No, that was awesome.
Yeah, no, I just did some research, and I was like, this is incredible, because I wondered why you chose that name. And then I was so inspired. So I'd love to hear sort of your inspiration for creating this. And it is such a different charity model. Not that other organizations aren't doing something sort of like this, but I haven't heard of many, to be honest with you.
Well, that's interesting to hear. I should just hire you. I've never heard it all condensed and said so succinctly what we're all about. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Of course.
You know, you talk about what was the inspiration. Sometimes God works in strange ways, and I apologize. I know we have listeners who very religious, non-religious at all, whatever. So I use these terms kind of carefully, but I didn't look to do this. I went to Ghana with a whole different mission involved. I mean, try to be brief, and my people in Ghana will tell you like, well, that's almost impossible. Michael's never brief. But, I had a long career. I was able to stop working. I was traveling a lot, enjoying myself. And my wife and I realized that this wasn't just due to our wonderful talents. A lot of luck, a lot of people helping us in difficult times, being in the right place at the right time.
Right.
So we really felt we wanted to give back. So in the course of traveling, I just saw all kinds of things around the world that there are problems here, and a lot of it relates to economic opportunity. So I had no intention of doing this particular thing when I went to Ghana. I was going to do coaching of small businesses to help build employment by making businesses better, which tied into what I had done as a professional. And then I like to quote, I'm Jewish background, I like to go to Saul on the road to Damascus, right? And I had that kind of a moment where kind of the world said to me, surprise, Michael, I have something very different for you to do.
Great.
And I was working through Rotary clubs, right? I had joined Rotary as a vehicle. Rotary has a unique thing there where if you're a member of a club, you can go to any other club in the world and don't have to ask permission, just show up. So I was just showing up in clubs in Ghana and saying like, hey, I've got this thing and I want some test cases. So in the course of doing that, people were, yeah, we'll take free advice. Why not? And I had one person who had introduced me to a guy, an American, who was doing social work, had been doing it for 20 years, married to a Ghanaian. And he was the one who started me on the education of just how the social system there sucks people in and puts them on paths of doing things that they don't want, whether it's sex work, whether it's scamming, whatever that is, right? Because people have to survive.
Right.
And he was working to get women off the street, and he had an idea of having a cooperative, but he didn't have an exit path. He was not a business guy. And at the time when I heard him, I didn't want anything to do with this because I was fully encapsulated in my Judeo-Christian prejudices. Like, I don't want anything to do with anybody having to do with sex work. All I could see was my wife and daughter saying, oh, you went to this country and now you're working with a bunch of sex workers, which, by the way, was exactly what they said.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
So then, so I said, fine. Then another Rotarian, and this guy was pretty high placed, in the Rotary hierarchy, said, oh, I have a young lady who has a business plan. You're coaching people. Would you coach her? My thing is not to work with startups. I work with existing businesses and make them better. But this guy was, You got to be political. And so I said, okay, I'll look at the business plan. To my amazement, because Laura, I've looked at a lot of business plans, a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And most of them are just horrific. I don't care what the education level of people, their work
Right.
experience, for some
Right.
reason,
They don't know how to
you know,
do it. Yeah.
no.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was pretty not very wordy, which was good. And it was clearly actionable. That's always something I look for in a plan. Like, could you put, so I said, okay, well, maybe I'll talk to this person. So we talk and I get to meet her just before I was leaving on to come back home. And I'm like blown away because this girl looks like she's 18. She's short, pretty, very nice. And we're talking about this thing. And I said, I didn't have a lot of time. I said, great, Mary. Her name's Mary. I'll work on this for you. So I get back to the US and I have set, I'm doing my coaching to the people that I've met, including Mary. So then Mary, after one or two meetings, gives me the great reveal. Okay. She is, in fact, a sex worker. She had come home from school when she was a freshman in high school. She lived in a village in the countryside. She had been sent to a sort of a boarding type school. And her
Right.
parents had divorced, and the house was basically nobody at home. And it was like, you're on your own. And her mother might show up once a month or whatever, but she really was now an independent person. So she hung around the village trying to make ends meet, doing little things, got pregnant. The boy's family wanted the child because it was a male and they had no male heirs. Basically said, we'll take the child, you go,
I know. That's so sad.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes to the capital city of Accra. And this is the classic, right? She applies for work, has no certificate, no qualifications. And they say, well, sleep with me and you can apply for the job, not get the job.
Right.
You
Just
apply for
apply.
Right.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
No, I'm desperate. Yes. Don't get the job. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And then I don't remember what was in her case. I think it was she was at a club or something and somebody who said, she was kind of bemoaning her plight and said, well, I get paid for what you do, give away for free. And there are a couple of different avenues that people get sucked into it.
Right.
She thinks about it and a friend said, hey, I know somebody who will pay you to sleep with them. So she does it. And that takes care of money for a little while. And then, before she know it, this is her work. So now I am, you're talking about what the inspiration is. Okay. So I am really having difficulty, right?
So is her business plan geared towards sex working?
It was basically an e-marketing business. It would sell like jewelry intended or clothes or lingerie, things that related to what she knew and had experience, right? But I was really troubled because one, how does somebody with a high school dropout at freshman know what a business plan is? Number two, how do they write a fairly decent business plan when so many other people with education don't? Number three, it's done in Microsoft Word. And okay, it's actually grammatically pretty good. So how does that all happen? And there was some research in there, some market research. She actually quoted, I went here, this source, whatever. So I'm like, how does it all happen? And she says to me, well, Michael, I may not have education, but I'm not dumb. Number
Uh-huh.
one.
Good for her. Mm-hmm.
Number two, you may not approve of what I do for a living, but I'm actually pretty good at it. And I'm good at it because people like me and I listen to them. And so if a businessman comes in from the UK or the United States and they're going to be here for a weekend or a week, whatever, we're just not in bed the whole time. You talk. And I use that talking to learn and educate. And some of
Wow.
them even will send me information. That's the market research. They'll make suggestions to me, etc. So now I'm kind of like blown away, right? Everything that remember the first guy I told you about who talked about the untapped potential of these people is in this human being. This
Mm-hmm.
is
For
not
sure.
theory, right? This is a person. And the other thing is that there was all this stuff about people who had helped her. I'm saying, like, this doesn't fit our classic model of everybody who is a user is evil.
Right.
Everything,
Right.
black and white world is getting very gray. So, as in Mary, I would really like to help you. Okay. But your business plan is too complicated. And it's based on a assumption that I don't think is realistic, which is you becoming an influencer. All right. You telling me that you're psychologically beat up and you need help now. So we need to find something that you can do and get you some money going. So now I'm like, put my business hat on. Now, Laura, I've coached individual professionals on how to build their practices and how to build networks for decades. I built a whole network building organization in the Southwest. And these people in general, your fractional CFOs, CMOs, consultants, business coaches, hate to market. And if you're doing any kind of network building, if you don't have some kind of follow-on, nobody's going to remember you.
Right.
So you've got to either be sending out email blasts or newsletters or something. Can't get any of these people to do that. So I said, Mary, I have a built-in market. Okay. I've been begging 100 of these guys to do this forever. And they all owe me. They owe me because I've given them a lot of free consultation. So I'm going to grab 2 or 3 or 4 guys, and we're going to say, I want you to spend $100 a month, give us, 3, 4 months. And I'm going to teach this young lady how to do newsletters on
Love
MailChimp.
it.
Because Mary, I'm pretty convinced if you did all what you could do, you can learn how to lay something out on MailChimp and Canva. And that's how we got started. And that was the inspiration. The inspiration was one person who had a
beautiful.
need, needed money now, had capability, but not all the training. And I had a marketplace that was unfulfilled. I had a whole bunch of people who could have gone to a bunch of folk in the United States to do this, but wouldn't because it's too expensive and took too much effort. So that was the inspiration. And once Mary was successful in that, then the light bulb went off and I said, I think we can scale. I think we can do this.
How long ago was that with Mary? How long?
That was in 2019.
That's amazing.
Right?
Is she part of your organization or is she on her own?
She is my operating manager in Ghana, become part of the Rotary. She's on the board of the Rotary Club to End Human Trafficking. She is actually going to become president of that club in June of 27.
So she has become an influencer in some ways, but an influencer to help, right? Young women not go into the trafficking world, but to really find an alternative. And so now she's able to teach some of those skills. So I love that she had that inner strength and that you saw that incredible potential and that drive, frankly, to do something other than what she was doing to make money. And she was desperate. And so there is no blame associated with individuals who end up falling into something because our global society doesn't offer alternatives until now. Now there's a couple alternatives, you're being one of them. But to find you is hard, and there are just way more people who are being trafficked. So I just love that this could spread and grow. So walk me through how the program essentially works now, because it's not that old, which I think is also quite remarkable.
I think it's important to segregate how we train and develop people versus what happens once they're done being trained.
Great.
So we're going to do the latter first. So we currently have a successful small business, a virtual assistant company, right? There are 5 people in it, all right, including Mary, and then, 4 people who've also gone through the training, et cetera. And they literally provide administrative executive assistant service to solopreneurs. That's their marketplace.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
And they handle it all at this point. Now, I say this jokingly, but it's actually serious. Like, I don't even know what they do anymore. Okay.
Because they're so efficient.
They have so evolved in terms of, like, each of them are using 3 or 5 different AI tools with which to either, develop lead generation, take some sort of content and transfer it into another. I mean, they find podcast opportunities. They find speaking opportunities for people.
That's great. So does a client reach out and say, these are my top 3 priorities and how could we structure them? And okay. And about how many clients do you have or that this organization have?
We've got about 15 clients at the moment.
It's great. So it's growing.
And we are profitable. I mean,
so great.
This quarter, we are truly accounting for everything, for our rent, everything that we have. And now the challenge is for them to grow and
for sure
on more people. Okay, but to get there takes quite a bit of work because we're taking people specifically who don't have the best education, don't have the best training in the world, and we have to bring them up to speed, and we need to bring them up to speed fairly quickly. So we've developed a training course. It came out of the very first one that we've done, and we've refined it. where it's a little bit of shock therapy. It's kind of like, you're not in Ghana anymore when you walk into this office. You are in the United States. And here are the behavior patterns that Ghana may be okay with you showing up an hour late. Ain't going to
Right,
work
the
here.
US not. That's so interesting.
You
So
know,
it's a cultural adaptation to the client
yes,
because all of your clients are in the US, which I think
correct.
is just absolutely fascinating. And in some ways, you are a nonprofit, but you're also a social enterprise
Well, we're
because
both.
yeah, you're both, which is really beautiful because you're giving these women an opportunity to grow and prosper and bring in more women. And I love that it's woman focused because they're the most vulnerable in the population you serve.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that we've been very strict on, Laura, is that, and this comes from my business background, it is really easy to scale up and collapse if you
Yeah,
don't
good
have
point.
all your fundamentals down. And I make it sound easy, like, oh, we bring them in and we train it. It took a lot of pain and agony, and we churned through a number of people in order to figure out how to get this right,
Yeah.
because the existing culture is very antithetical to what we're trying to achieve. There's no trust. People don't trust each other. There is a feeling of get it now because it's probably going to go away. So trying to get people to think longer term is difficult. We brought in too many when we're trying to get them to be into understand what, let's say, American work ethic and culture. But we also tried to bring in a certain amount of American management, participative management. That was a big mistake.
Mm-mm.
I think
Interesting. Share why, because that's a really interesting, because you're not approaching this colonialistically, which is a problem with some nonprofits that go in, but you're approaching it with if your client is of this culture, and this is like 101 organization development, you have to understand who the client is, right? I teach a class right now where it's really, I'm teaching them to understand who is the client, what do they want, and you have to partner
correct.
on their behalf. So it's a beautiful way to have married your background with something that is really doing incredibly good work. So share how that kind of was not a good idea.
I think a lot of people who come from the United States, and I was going to say white people, but I know a lot of Black Americans who've gone over and had the same experience because they're a culture, not that culture, despite its skin color. And that is, we want to trust people. We want to believe everybody is going to work for their good. We look at things and we say, oh, well, that's not that much money, whatever. And that's not the case at all. All right. First of all, as I said, trust is something that is really, really lacking. I mean, I've read articles that the effect of the slave trade over centuries was basically to destroy trust in
Right.
West African society. And then so many of the societies they're in are dysfunctional that you may be going along and I've known Rotarians with successful businesses, government changes and suddenly they're undercut and they lose everything.
Right.
So there's a feeling that you can't depend on things. So like literally everybody, and I'm talking about somebody who might be the head of a corporate organization has a side hustle because you never
You never
know.
know when the rug will be pulled out from under you. I get that.
We know that to build a successful business takes a long time. You have to stick with it. You make mistakes. You go through hard times. You recover and do whatever. So trying to get that message across. Okay. And I know that I tried to delegate too much responsibility to them before they were ready. And eventually, I don't know, have you been to Africa?
Yeah, I had spent some time in Uganda, there's
Okay.
a lot of similarities, especially in the sex trafficking and sort of
Right.
the HIV. I
Well,
was there doing public health work. It's really challenging. And they also
there,
have a tribal or clan system, so they often take care of
yeah.
their own and don't reach out beyond that. So it's just tricky. You're right.
Yeah.
It's very tricky.
Among the educated Rotarians and the people who are my advisors, and I've got some great people, they have a behavior pattern, which I've only kind of figured out in the last couple of years, which is they will see me doing things wrong and they will just let me do them until I kind of fall on my face. And then they'll come and say, oh, well, we do that.
Right. We didn't think to tell you. Yeah, it's funny.
No, it's not that they
Right.
didn't think to tell me. It's
Right.
kind of like, no, he needs to learn this. And the best way for him to learn this is to go. And there was a time, not about a year and a half ago, where we had a real crisis where people were feel that I was not being fair, that I had favorites. And part of the problem was we were raising money and then COVID hit and all our fundraising just dried up.
It's hard
And
for
so we were
everybody.
working like on half the money that we did. And I was forced to be sort of operating manager, day-to-day manager, which was never the intention of this, to kind of get it over the hump. And I would not call day-to-day operations my strong point. That's probably a gross understatement.
Well, you had to step in and sort of do a little rescuing at that point because of COVID. And I think you're not the only founder or executive director that's been in that position. It was such a tough time for smaller nonprofits.
And it carried on for quite a number of years. So finally, one of my chief advisors, Jonas, said, because I was ready to just like, I'm done. But a lot of money and a lot of my time, and I don't need people to tell me that I'm, like ripping them off or whatever. And Jonas said, no, Michael, you're not doing that. We're not letting you go, number one. And number two, we're going to do things the Ghana way, not the American way.
The U.S. way. Which actually,
Yeah.
I think that there's probably a combination that even though the client is American, so you are united from the United States, you have to adapt to that. But the internal workings there are Ghanaian. And so you have to kind of have this mixed culture, right? Which is really interesting. And it's fascinating because they might have let you fail to teach you a lesson. And yet when you failed to the point of where you were going to give up, they were like, oh no, we're not going to have that. So they saw the value. So it's an interesting kind of co-culture creation in order to make this work effectively.
I will tell you the big lesson that I've learned is that, so we're dealing with fundamental social change, right?
Right.
I mean, we're taking people, we're just transforming them, not just giving them skills, but we're teaching them how to work and how to manage their own money. And I mean, there's just so much going on in the context of a culture that's pulling them in a lot of different directions. This stuff does not happen fast. I mean,
Right.
it takes a lot of time. I mean, a lot of people say, well, how many people have you transformed? I said, you don't understand. I'm still working the bugs out to make sure we have a real model that will actually work without me.
Because you're trying to leave a legacy piece and you're trying to leave it in country that works in a global market, or at least in the US currently. So it has that piece of. This episode is sponsored in part by one of our partners, positively impacting the nonprofit sector, GiveLink. Instead of wondering where your donation went, you can now donate exactly what nonprofits need, from diapers to school supplies to hygiene products, and see photo proof when your items arrive. It's 100% free for nonprofits with no fees or commissions. If you're a nonprofit, here's your chance to sign up with GiveLink as one of their nonprofits receiving needed products and goods you select. Small and Gutsy is not just a partner, but is a recipient as one of their nonprofits because we signed up and I'm really thrilled to partner with them. Check them out and sign up if you're a nonprofit, or if you're a donor and want to give goods directly, take a look at all the nonprofits listed on their website, which is givelink.app/en. And the link will also be in all of the show notes. So my recommendation is check out GiveLink. Thanks. And thanks for partnering with us and for sponsoring Small and Gutsy. Complication. And I also feel like when you are a relatively new nonprofit and doing something somewhat different, particularly in the culture, it changes one of the hardest things. You know this from your work in general, is one of the hardest things because, as you said, change is based on, even if you want the change, there's natural resistance to it because you feel very secure in what you know. You feel very insecure in what you don't know. And so
Right.
trusting a foreigner or even trusting somebody in the Ghanaian culture who's done this, like Mary, still is a challenge. Probably easier to trust Mary than you, but still it's a challenge. And then you have on top of it sort of, again, I don't know Ghana, but a tribal system in some capacity. So it makes it even more complicated. So I love that you're really thinking about the foundation of the program, how it works. You know that it will work. It's just a matter of time and building. And I also love actually that it sounds in some way like you do vet people coming in the door to determine whether they have the drive. It's interesting. They don't have to have the skills. They have to have the drive and the capacity to learn. And there's a very big, that's teachable. What's not teachable as easily, and we know this from our shared work, I think, is the attitude. If the attitude is, I'm going to take as much as I can and get out, that's not long-term sustainability.
Right.
So you're right. You are addressing cultural norms in a new way, and it's going to take decades, but don't fear because you've already started to see change. You already have early adopters that are working effectively, and that's incredible in a system that is resistant to change. And then there's a whole nother side to it, which is if it's a male-dominated society in terms of we tell women what we want a sex working trade because we get what we want and we make money off of them, that is very hard to break through because it's been around for a while and it is actually an oppressed environment for women.
Laura, you really hit an interesting point. So in addition to what I'm doing with Theodora, I am also in the Rotary Club to End Human Trafficking. And we have an economic development initiative we're working there that's borrowing. It's more oriented for people who would not qualify to do outsourcing type of work. But I'm surrounded by people who are very passionate about ending sex trade, even though sex trafficking is actually a minority of total human slavery.
Right. Fair.
Forced work and all this type of thing.
Absolutely.
Is
Labor.
a majority. And slavery has been with us for as long as we've known civilization. And so yelling and screaming, and I understand. I mean, I know people, I see people, and I've seen what they've gone through. I'm just as appalled as everybody else. But I don't think that getting all emotional and angry necessarily does any good when you have to think of how do we possibly adjust these gigantic aspects of culture that allow this to happen.
I don't think you're going to get any negative comments for that because what you're doing is money is power. So you're going after the economic sustainability of women so they don't have to be in that trade or even in the labor trade if you look at the Rotary initiative.
Right.
That's different, right? So I feel like rather than screaming and yelling, you're taking action in a way that hopefully over time will fundamentally provide choice. And if someone chooses that trade, okay, if they're making money, I'm not going to be judgmental around that if it in fact is a choice. But most often in the slave trade, there is no choice. The choice has been taken away.
And in Africa, at least, I would say one of my ladies called it as we were self-trafficked. Is that we feel we are making choices, okay?
Right, that's such a good expression.
But when you have so few options and alternatives, you take this because it looks like a better choice, and then you slip.
Right, it's the biggest gaslighting that there is, frankly.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right on in terms of, we have to look at this as multi-generational. So having Mary, okay, who is now, and this didn't come easy, by the way.
Of course not. How
Getting
could
Mary to accept responsibility as okay, I am going to be the leader, whatever. And they and her cohort talking about it is our job to get the next generation going. And
Correct.
that we just gave out bonuses based on profitability. So yes, we know that if we make money, this is going to be our thing. That really changes some of the narrative because if you just have one entrepreneur, male or female,
Right.
and they are going to own it and they're just looking at to make money, the likelihood of it continuing on is not very high.
Or the likelihood that people can be further exploited is high, depending upon the culture or the environment. So the fact that you're spreading that and sharing that entrepreneurial spirit and providing that in a fair way with opportunities already sets the landscape for change.
Yeah.
Mary is very different from when you first met her or from her initial business plan, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a story in and of itself, which is incredibly beautiful. So I think you need to be super proud of her and you and the foundation that you've created, even though it's been incredibly hard work. Because as we said before, change and even an individual is hard. Imagine change in an entire system. We can look at weird things in our own culture, which is our silly examples. But when I was a kid, the idea, or even an adolescent, the idea of getting in a car, much less a driverless car, right, like a Waymo, or a car with a stranger like an Uber would have been completely outside of hitchhiking, which, my parents said, please don't do that, was crazy, right?
Right.
So, and now it's a norm. It has become a verb in our society. So there are ways that we push society. It just is, again, I think you hit the nail on the head. And it almost was like a gut punch when you talk about trust, because trust through generations of slavery in all different aspects is understandable that lack of trust exists. And it's hard to break through that. So it's pretty incredible that you have, to a certain extent, and are continuing to do that.
Yeah. We use the term in both the Rotary program and Theodora that the key for us is to plant yeast cells.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Each little thing by itself isn't going to change society. But if we have the right environment, the right culture within there, it's going to grow and it's going to grow and it's going to grow, in part because of our demand focus. And you mentioned this in the introduction, and I think it's important that we go back to this. I mean, I've talked to survivor programs in the United States who don't understand that we can't just give job training and then send them off on their own. That you've got to have, like I've suggested to them, why don't you do an employee leasing company? Why don't you contract with food service people and have the jobs, et cetera? So the fact that there are, what was the 2020 census, 25 million people who are self-employed, and that number is growing. I mean, just read the Wall Street Journal. X number of Black women and women are dropping out because they're tired. So many people are being fired. What was it? I saw some big bank had record profits, and then the next paragraph is, and we're going to let go of 1,000 people.
Unbelievable, right? Yeah. Because I think that so much is being automated, or AI or other factors. But I think what you're really talking about is true social enterprises. So where you get trained and then you do have the opportunity for employment, and you either help set up that employment or have a relationship with an employment. So it doesn't have to be inside your organization if that's taking on too much. Although I like the idea of it being a streamline. Like the one locally in LA is Homeboy Industries, is a really good example of where people who've formerly been incarcerated learn a skill, and it's often in cooking and meals, and now they've grown into other industries. And it's been incredible. Started by a minister many, many years ago. So there are some examples. They're just not as frequent or as common in the arena of social service programs. They will do job training. They try to do placement. But I agree, placement, and I used to actually work for one a million years ago in supported work. And the problem is placement didn't often hold, even with support, if there wasn't an opportunity for a shift or change in that system where you place somebody. If they did not wholeheartedly take on the concept of a social enterprise, or really addressing the needs of the individual to try to get them in terms of an opportunity or level playing field with other employees, it was really challenging. So I like the idea of an individual organization taking that on. And there are some, but there aren't as many. So I like that you could even give consultation on this side of the ocean to organizations that should do something similar.
I think I'm a business person first and foremost. And if there is no demand for a service, there is no business.
Right. There is no service.
And
right,
there are no
exactly.
jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately, in the marketplace that we are, I think even with AI, I don't think in the solopreneur, when you take, let's look at the mean curve, right? Sure, there's going to be early adopters and they're going to set up an AI agent and do that. But most people, I mean, like I talk about, I know all kinds of people today that aren't even using 15-year-old technology, aren't even using something like MailChimp, Constant Contact. They're not going to jump in to do AI. So
right.
I use this. So this will be my little promo. We talk about each one of our women can handle about 5 clients. Okay. And at that, they're probably billing about $1,200, and they will get paid like $300. $300 is middle class in Ghana.
Yeah, it's great. It's
Okay.
actually will
Really
help
good.
them not only survive, but sustain.
Right. And that kind of a markup is what you look for in the service industry, to have a viable business, to do whatever. That means a person is billing 1,200 over, let's just say, 15,000, a year. And let's say I had 1,000 people working. So now I have 1,000 people I've made middle class, right? They have 5 clients each. All right. We've got a business that's doing $1.5 million, which in Ghana terms would be a really big business. And we'd have 5,000 clients, right? Divided by 25 million. we wouldn't even have measurable market share. We would not even show up.
That's so amazing when you think about it. And then one quick question that occurs to me just because of the work I had done in Uganda. The money that then is collected by US clients goes to the organization and then the women get paid. Does any of that have to be paid to the Ghanaian government? So it's a non-governmental, it's really an important distinction because one of the things that I worked on in Uganda was an organization where direct funding went directly to the clients who were providing services for kids at the one I worked at. So I think that's a huge important that it goes directly to the organization and directly to the women then. So right now you have 5 women. Is Mary primarily responsible for recruiting new women to come into the system and go through the training and then begin? And how long is the training, generally speaking?
So we just started 3 new trainees in September, and we have a lot of strategic partners. So we work through a Rotary Club there, and we work through an organization called Muslim Family Counseling Service. So we don't want to be in the recruiting business.
Got it.
There are a lot of people that are in this ground, there, and we can say, this is the kind of person we want. So yeah, we do the screening, but we don't we work through strategic partners.
That's great.
Who are better able to do that.
Yeah, they know the folks on the ground. So that makes them a much better pipeline for you. And then does Mary primarily do the screening?
She does most of the screening, but our existing staff all talk to people and kind of chime in on what they do. The training is done by our local people who do all the training.
Great.
Again, AI and stuff have made things so much easier. We've been able to consolidate things, English training type of things. It's made the ability for them to do written English quantum steps better.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's still, it takes a good year before we would feel comfortable letting somebody handle sort of a lower
client.
level on their own.
And during that year, are they paid for their training? Good. That's great. I just am asking these because it isn't an assumption. And so it's great. So you're really getting them out of the exploitation trade early on, even to sign up for training. And then they work really hard to then they know the ultimate goal is they'll get their own set of clients, which is great. I imagine that even once they get their clients, you've got a support network inside your organization so they can ask a question or I have this, they want this issue. Yeah, which is always ongoing learning.
We're not a virtual agency. So we don't just say, okay, you own the client. We act as a back office. So let's say certain people have certain skills. So let's say you're working for me and your specialty is getting them to do podcasts and, speak and do it. But let's say you needed to edit video and that's not your thing. There might be somebody in the group who's done a lot of video editing. And so you
love
them in.
I think that's great because you specialize the service based on your client needs as well as the expertise that someone has within the group. And you can build on that and expand it, which is great. So I do have to ask you, did I get the association to Theodora correct?
Absolutely. And we were, we had gotten our first group together. We were struggling for a name. And then I'm a big history buff. And I said, oh, I remember this story. And I, vaguely, and then I researched it. I said, yeah, okay. So I showed it to the ladies and they were just like super excited. They said, yeah, that's it.
That's so great because it's also a connection for them. It's totally a connection for them. And in some way, what they aspire to is not only change for themselves, but for the system. And that's exactly what Theodora was able to do under really difficult circumstances. So I'm glad that worked out. So I understand the system. I know you have a big network. How do you continue to get new clients once a trainee is ready?
Well, again, the company gets the clients, right?
Okay.
So if you can think of it, we have 2 corporations. We have a U.S. corporation, right? Because we have to have something that can bill and collect here in the United States, make it easy for people to pay. And then we have a company in Ghana that has all the overhead. So that's to pay the salary and the rent, everything else. And so money's collected in the U.S. and it's just sent to Ghana directly to that company to pay all its expenses. So the company owns the clients. Lead gen is our next big challenge. All right. So if we look at the sales funnel, Mary does everything once a lead has been generated. So she can close, she can determine the scope of work, create the proposal, close it, do the onboarding.
Great.
I have been doing most of the lead gen, though we are getting more kind of word of mouth stuff. But this year and next year is our time to start really trying to develop a self-sufficient lead generation system. And with that piece in place, the sky's the limit.
Because you have a big network, but on top of that, you want to grow that so that the leads continue to come in and then maybe in some way become systematized, for lack of a better word, so that there's a pipeline.
It can't depend on any individual's network. That's not sustainable.
Right. So true. So it's interesting that you've grown in this way, word of mouth, and now you're ready for that next step, which is so great because it's great for all these women you have yet to bring into your system, into the training program, and then release in such a wonderful way. Eventually, would you maybe open a second office somewhere else or within Ghana? How do you see that sort of future thoughts?
The model is definitely scalable, which is different than Theodora on virtual assistants being scalable. There are a couple of key components. First of all, you have to identify a marketplace. Like we wouldn't want to fragment the solopreneur market. We might open a branch in somewhere else, services, but it'd be the same sort of company marketing system. But let's say somebody, well, this is an actual case. So I'm through the Rotary program. I have a group in Zambia. Okay. And there's a school for orphans and they would love to get something like this. So the key would be, can we find another marketplace?
Got it.
There is specific demand. So we're actually experimenting with this. So Rotary clubs often outsource their administrative services, but the kind of services that they need are very different from what a solopreneur has. And they're handled in a different way because most Rotary clubs would have multiple people volunteering to do things. Whereas with a solopreneur, right, you just work with one person. So we actually had a meeting on this like 2 hours ago.
Oh, that's so funny.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to have a champion. The champion is the person in the United States who knows the marketplace and says, I know what they need. So let's say you wanted to be the champion and you said, I know podcasters and I know all the work that they do. And I can tell you that they're held back because of these things that they can't get. So I can identify a job. I can identify functions, right? So then the champion's got two jobs. The champion says, I'm going to define the work that you need to do. And I will be the one who sort of, as you do work, I'll be saying, nope, nope, yes, yes, okay. But I'm also going to recruit a couple of angel clients.
Great.
Because we have to have a core to start with and work on. This is exactly what I did to get started. So then, great. So now we've got a core of angel people say, yeah, if we could get these services done the way we want them and at this kind of a price or whatever, yeah, and we trust you, Laura. So we're in. We're in for a couple of years. We'll see what this works. Great. Now I need a champion on the other side, someone who knows the culture and do the training. In the case of Zambia, Faye Yalenga, the person who's been part of the nonprofit organization that has been doing this school for orphans, would be our local champion, right?
Perfect.
She knows there, she knows the people, she knows the system, she knows everything. And Faye, we can say Faye, in conjunction with, let's say, Theodora Africa's knowledge base, expertise, you're going to set up this operation. Now we start doing iterative tests. Great. First thing to do is we're going to use this particular functionality and we're going to train people on that and do whatever. And, we've got a commitment of some money. So we have the money to pay people to do whatever. And this is probably a 2-year process. Iterate until we say like, okay, we've got something.
We got it. So it's really a pilot model over a period of time, which is great. And you take a lesson in some way in patience, knowing that each step or each milestone is closer to, and that I love the concept of iterating anyway, because you're not married to a particular structure or system per se, the basic framework, but then you can tweak it based on the needs, both of the culture there and the culture of the need of your client. So I really like that a lot. So it's really great. That was so funny. You just had that conversation. So it just made me wonder about it because I do think that this is so scalable in the best way. And so to do it with a pilot, iteration, and time are the things that you really need to make it happen, which is wonderful. Are there any, because you mentioned a few, and I didn't want to leave this question out necessarily, any aha moments, either aha, wow, that I didn't expect that, and that's great, or aha, oops, I didn't expect that. You alluded to one earlier and talked about it, but I didn't know.
I think I said the oops ones, but there was an incredible aha moment. It was about a year ago when I was talking to Mary about a bunch of things. I think it was actually one of my trips to Ghana. I mean, I've been to Ghana like 20 times. So
Wow. You are committed for sure. Yeah.
I think my family would say that he's crazy, but
It's okay. I prefer commitment, determination, all of that good stuff. Persistent. Okay,
maybe it
go
should be
ahead.
all gutsy and crazy.
Yeah. I love it. Okay.
So I'm going there and I'm talking about things, and I'm suggesting, and Mary saying, Michael, we're already doing all this. All right. We're already doing this particular thing. We're doing this particular thing. We're using these tools. And like I said, there was a ha moment, like, they've outstripped me. They know more than I know. They're on a self-learning pattern now.
I love
I
it.
still need to give them some guidance on certain things, right? Of how to apply their self-learning in a way to be a little more strategic. Like, they're really good with the mechanics, like we could use this tool to create this, etc. But my next step is I need you to start understanding who Americans are, not me understanding and tell you. You need to get the understanding, which is going to be harder because you're not there, whatever, but it's not impossible.
Right. It's such a good example of her early internal drive. She knew she wanted to do something more. And that pattern and that internal drive has continued for her. I love that she's adaptable. She herself is iterative. She's a learner for sure. And so it really has given way to this opportunity. And I also wonder, and you have this probably in your training, but do you have a manual of sorts so when a new trainee comes in, because the tools are iterating themselves all the time? So is that part of what you have to consider?
Yes and no. I mean, we do have a bunch of stuff. We have something called Theodora University, and it's a whole set of things in Google Drive or whatever. When you have a tiny company trying to update and, keep things going, et cetera. I told Mary that she should be doing the podcast. And she is absolutely adamant, like, no way in hell am I getting out there and talking,
Oh,
whatever. But maybe someday we could convince her.
yeah. I've done second podcasts. I've often had participants and I've often had people, it totally depends. And once she maybe hears this podcast, she'll be more comfortable because it is just a conversation. And I would be delighted. I'd be delighted to host her. Would be really wonderful. So keep that in mind for the future.
She is now, I think I mentioned you, she's scheduled to become president of the Rotary Club to End Human Trafficking. They want her to come to the U.S. and get training. There's training to be president, which I think will be a major growth step for her to get a chance to really see and meet, all these people she's been talking to and meeting.
It'd be great. And she sounds like such a sponge. She just soaks it in. So it sounds like she has always been able to do that. So if you are ready for a round of quick and gutsy questions,
All right,
they're not. There's no wrong answer here. Okay, just so you
All
know.
right.
What is at the top of your wish list for Theodora Africa? However, the answer can't be money or funding, because that's always an easy one.
And it'd be
for
something that would
nonprofits.
use money or funding.
Give me your answer, and then we'll
seriously.
judge. No.
We need a facility. Okay. We need to be able to control our space. We need to be able to control things like power, is a real thing. So if we had space and solar power so that
It's a
we
good point.
knew and we've already got Starlink, which is great. That solved one big problem. We got a backup generator was another big problem. But if we're going to really scale this, we can't be at the whim of landlords and doing whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yes, it takes funding, but it really is the space that you need and then the consistency of the service that you have control over, which is important so that you don't all of a sudden crash in the middle of something. If you were to think of a song, or it could be a lyric of a song that describes Theodora Africa, what would it be?
It would be the choral part of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Okay, because it's a dance in unison. So tell me why.
Because it is this huge uplifting thing, this joy of overcoming. And, it is this incredible, those last sections of it. It just gives you this feeling of power and that we can overcome and we can accomplish it. Because literally everyone I talked to when we started, I mean, even the people who gave me money gave it to me because they like Michael, not because they thought this was going to work.
Wow. I hope they're happily surprised at this point.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's been this really overcoming and showing that something really
It's
powerful
beautiful.
can happen. Yeah.
With everybody working together, which is really the part of that. I love that. What makes Theodora Africa gutsy? Because you are certainly gutsy. What makes you gutsy?
It's the fact that our people have to fight through their own culture
Yeah.
to go and do the work and be the commitment that they do. You know, when you have to take 2 hours, 3 hours to commute in an unair conditioned jitney type thing to get to work, right? And you want to get your ID card and you have to take 2 days off of work and stand in line. I mean, just all these things. And to say, I'm going to fight through all that and I'm still going to do the work for the client and I'm going to believe in what we're doing, et cetera. That takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, it sure does. It takes guts. It takes what I had said before, really determination. It takes the recognition that things happen over time and a tremendous amount of, I think, personal dignity, knowing that you're doing this for a bigger purpose, not just for yourself, but a bigger purpose, which I love. What is something that outsiders, or maybe even a few insiders, don't know about Theodora Africa?
I don't think people really understand that this is going to be employee owned, that this is really driven to be. I've had a lot of people say, so how much money did you make out of this, Michael? Because that they assume that because it's a business and it's providing services. We really believe in participative management. We had to take a step back, but we'll get there. Yeah, I don't think people know and understand that.
I think for some, it's just such a new concept, which it shouldn't be, because I think, was it Peter Senge who did a lot on participative management? But it was really about the opportunity of shared learning, which is what you have really created here, and that they participate in their own future, their own outcome, and you do it as a shared opportunity, which I love. If you could get one celebrity or influencer outside of Mary, because she's an influencer now, to endorse or talk about Theodora Africa, who would it be?
I mean, I think somebody like Oprah Winfrey, who's had a similar type of journey, who relates to the demographic, who really has the ears of a lot of people.
To be amazing. And she's done work in Africa. I mean, she has done work in South Africa and other parts of Africa where she has tried to help young women, particularly, in incredible ways. So I have an enormous amount of respect for her. So how do people reach you, Michael?
They reach us through our website. So if they're interested in more the nonprofit side and whatever. And by the way, we're looking to build a community of people who have similar ideas. So in Africa, they talk about the missing middle, and there are a lot of enterprises in Africa, but nobody talks to each other.
Right.
There's a lack of mass and understanding. So just anybody who's interested in, we're not happy with the way social impact is done historically. We want to be more focused. I don't know if you've read the Toxic Charity book, but that kind of thing. Then through TheodoraAfrica.com, that's the nonprofit. If somebody is interested in, I could probably use some services, right? I have a small business. I have my solopreneurship, whatever. Any of the people listening, I'm tired of posting all my own videos. I'm tired of going through my own email, all these type of things. They go to TheodoraGhana.com.
And then they'll be paired up, which is great, with a virtual assistant.
Well, then they'll meet Mary.
Yeah, they'll meet Mary first, right?
What is it you need? What do you want?
Yeah. I love that because in some ways she's a gatekeeper because she's had so much experience and then she can sort of direct it, which is really wonderful. And is it oftentimes that a client might need more than one type of service, I would imagine? So the scope of work, would it ever be then offered by more than one staff?
Yeah.
Or not necessarily?
Yes. Well,
depends.
Typically we have somebody who's the lead, who's there.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then if there's another person that needs to come in, they come in. But if somebody can say, I need a full-time person, we would say, well, we will recruit and train that person for you. Because, our people are all based on providing fractions of FTE. So we have that option as well.
That's really good to know, because you think of virtual assistant as usually part-time, but it doesn't have to be, which is great. So I just want to take a moment and thank you. This was a fabulous conversation. I learned a lot, and you have an amazing, really nonprofit and social enterprise that's helping so many women. So I applaud you. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate the opportunity, to someone of your reach to have this opportunity to talk.
That was great. Please go to smallandgutsy.org to check out all of our episodes. And if you're so inclined, please purchase some Small and Gutsy merchandise, consider sponsoring an episode, or making a donation. Both are tax deductible and help keep us going and spotlighting these great organizations. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and don't reflect the position or views of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the donors, the sponsors, and my incredible board of directors, Brianna Carmichael, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Ari McCoy, Melissa Greitz, and Serena Rajabian, who believed in me in this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. Together, we are spreading social impact, and you can help us. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to email me the name of any organization you feel would benefit from being interviewed. From small and gutsy to big with impact. I'm Dr. Laura Scherck Wittcoff, and thanks for listening.